Sharing with us throughout some of our tech challenges, which are all too familiar to everybody at this point. So welcome to the, what month is it? July Age Friendly Seattle Civic Coffee, which is presented by Age Friendly Seattle as well as the Seattle Public Library. So my name is Dinah Stevens. I am the program manager, and we have a few of our team members as well with us. Elda Mercuria and Meg Wolf will be popping in and helping to moderate the chat. So you might see those names. And so thanks to both of them for making this event happen. So these are our monthly events, and we are happy to be featuring Parks and Recreation this month. So it is National Parks and Recreation Month, and you will hear a bit more about what that is and what that means in a moment from our moderator. But I'm just going to open us up with a few announcements before I hand it off to our moderator and the panelists for our discussion today. Okay, so before we get started, for those of you who have been to these events before or other City of Seattle events, you might know that we like to start events and often meetings with a land acknowledgement. And so I would like to share that the City of Seattle acknowledges that we are on the traditional lands of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present. And we honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. And if you don't know much about the Duwamish tribe, please visit www.duwamishtribe.org. There's a lot more to learn about the people on the inside. So I encourage everyone to take the opportunity and do so. And so hopefully one of my colleagues can pop that link in the chat for folks. The Duwamish people are still here, and so you can find out more about them at that link. So I just want to welcome our panelists today. It's been really a pleasure to get to know them and learn a little bit about their organizations and their areas of expertise. So today we have a couple folks from the Seattle Parks and Recreation Department, some of whom have been, both of whom I think have been featured on this event in years past. So that's always a good sign when you invite someone back. As well as partners at Sound Generations who do tremendous work around the region, working with older adults, and History Link. And so Jennifer Ott is here to tell us a little bit more about the history of Seattle's parks and the Olmsted system, which I am a new resident of Seattle, and it was really a joy for me to learn more about this history. So I'm excited for her to share that as well. So I'm going to introduce Cheryl, and then Cheryl is going to introduce the rest of the panelists, and I will go dark. But do stay for the entire presentation. We will do some question and answer in the last section, but if you have questions at any time during the presentation, you are welcome to pop them in the chat, and we will relay those to our panelists. If we don't answer your question, we'll try to follow up with an answer. And then we do have some announcements from some colleagues at the end to hear a little bit more about what's happening at the library and what's next for Age Friendly. So I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl, who is one of the first people I met when I joined the City of Seattle about 6 months ago. And it's been great to pick her brain about older adults and parks and recreation. She has a tremendous history here at the City of Seattle, over 40 years, working with lifelong recreation, developing and presenting programs in fitness, social opportunities for older adults. And really, her team had to pivot hard during COVID, but they did it, got a lot of their work online, and now they are bringing it back in person. And so you'll be able to hear a little bit more from Cheryl and from her colleague Tamara about what that looks like. So with that, Cheryl, I think I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, I'm going to introduce the other people on the panel today, and we have Paige Dennison, the Director of Health, Wellness, and Project Enhance, which is Enhance Fitness at Sound Generations. And Paige has worked for over 20 years with that organization, and often I run into Paige across the country at national aging conferences and stuff, so that's kind of fun. And it's really great. She's the nationwide leader for that organization, and she's stationed right here in Seattle. So I kind of think we get a little bit of special treatment at Seattle Parks and Recreation because she's so close. But I believe her bio is on the screen, so I'm not going to read it. But Paige has a lot of sound experience, and she's a a great person to work with and very knowledgeable. Tamara Keefe is a member of my team, and she's in charge of dementia-friendly recreation, serving people with memory loss, and rainbow recreation, serving our LGBTQ plus community. Those are new roles to her, and she's doing a great job emerging from the pandemic and coming up with programs and opportunities for volunteers and all that. And she'll tell you more about that in our talk. And Jennifer Ott is the Assistant Director of History Link and the author of Olmsted in Seattle. And this is a great organization that several retired parks people are on, and they preserve and promote the parks that the Olmsted brothers designed and built in the city of Seattle. So I also am anxious to hear more from her about that. But I'm going to give you a little bit of background on National Parks and Recreation Month. Since 1985, people in the United States have celebrated Park and Recreation Month in July to promote building strong, vibrant, and resilient communities through the power of parks and recreation. Parks are at the center of so many experiences and memories, moments that park and recreation professionals help make happen. Our local parks are often our first experiences in nature, our introduction to a favorite hobby or a physical activity. They're places to gather with friends and family, spaces to celebrate life's special moments, spots of respite and healing, sites that connect us with essential community services, and so much more. I got a little bit of demographic information from the Parks Office that I wanted to share with you about Seattle Parks and Recreation. So we manage 6,441 acres of parks and 489 parks. We have athletic fields, tennis courts, play areas, specialty gardens, and more than 25 miles of boulevards, many of which were designed by the Olmsted brothers, and 120 miles of trails. The system comprises of about 12% of the city's land area. Seattle Parks and Recreation also manages many facilities, including 24 community centers, 8 indoor swimming pools, 2 outdoor swimming pools, 3 environmental education centers, 2 small craft centers, 4 golf courses, an outdoor stadium, and much, much more. So that's our city. According to National Recreation and Parks Association, NRPA, 2020 engagement with parks report, an overwhelming majority of people living in the United States assert that they benefit from local parks and that their communities benefit from local parks. People visit their local park and recreation facilities more than twice a month on average, with 1 in 10 visiting at least weekly, if not daily. 82% of United States adults agree that visiting their local parks, trails, and open spaces is essential for their mental and physical well-being during the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Landscape and Urban Planning, among other sources, many communities of color and other marginalized groups, such as LGBTQ+, immigrants, people with low income, and people with disabilities, lack the opportunity to experience and engage in high-quality parks and recreation because these resources don't exist near them, or if they do, they're not safe, welcoming, or inclusive. Since 1974, the Seattle Parks Lifelong Recreation Program in the city of Seattle has been serving the community with vibrant programs in physical activity, social engagement, travel, education, and arts for adults aged 50 and over. They provide exceptional, accessible, and affordable programs that promote quality of life and engage a diverse community. For decades, local park and recreation agencies have been offering programs and services to address the diverse health and wellness needs of the growing older adult population. According to the Healthy Aging in Parks survey report, 9 in 10 local park and recreation agencies dedicate facilities, activities, and programming to older adults. 44% target adults as young as 50 years old for their older adult offerings. A variety of programs and services are offered, including exercise classes, field trips, arts and crafts, special events, opportunities to mentor, work and volunteer, nutrition programs and services, among many others. This month, we have 3 great panelists who can shed some light on this topic. So I'm just going to ask some questions for the panelists and let them take time to answer. I'm going to start with Jennifer. Seattle's parks have a deep impact on how we live in and enjoy our city. Can you tell us a little bit about the Olmsted Park System's history and philosophy?
Again, thanks so much. So we are so lucky to have this Olmsted Brothers design park system as the sort of bones of our park system. And the roots of it go back to 1903 when the Olmsted Brothers were invited out to Seattle to design a park system. Seattle was growing like gangbusters following the 1897 gold rush. And so we went from about 43,000 people in 1890 to 237,000 people in 1910. So it was just, I call it galloping growth. It was crazy. And so city leaders knew that if you were going to be a real city in American sense, that you needed to have a park system. And that is traced back to the senior Olmsted, Frederick Law Olmsted Sr.'s influence on city planning in the United States by about 1903. And so John Olmsted came out, one of the brothers, and he designed a park system in 1903 that had large city parks like Washington Park, Woodland Park, those sort of anchor parks. And then he designed a circuit boulevards that connected those parks. And then he also located different parks in the neighborhoods to provide access throughout the neighborhoods to open space. And so then the city grew in 1906, 1907 with several annexations. So they invited Olmsted back to design a larger park system to expand it to include those newly annexed areas. And so with that report, we got some real insight into his thinking because he wrote a whole preamble. And some of the things he talked about really represent the legacy of his stepfather, Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. And that's this idea that parks are for everyone, but it doesn't matter what your economic background, what's your ethnic background, where you live in the city, you should have access to open space. And so specifically, he called for a park with play areas for smaller children within a half mile of every home, and then a play field with play facilities for older children within a mile of every home. And then he also explained that those parkways were a way to connect, sort of extend the city in linear parks, extend the parks in a linear way through the city. And the idea was that no matter where you lived, you could very easily get to that park landscape that surrounded the boulevard and then follow that route to the nearest large park. And so we also got the benefit of his philosophy that each of the large parks, particularly, but any of the parks, should really embrace their genius of place, their sort of what is special about that place. And so there should be a lot of variety through the park system. And that's why we have one park with a zoo and one park with old growth forest and another with beach access. And so they're all very carefully thought out in what is special about that place and what are we capturing.
Interesting. Tamara, through your position in the Lifelong Recreation Unit at Seattle Parks and Recreation, you've been involved in efforts to increase physical activity and social connection in different ways and focused on specific communities. Your newest role is developing and running programs for LGBTQ+ older adults, as well as people experiencing memory loss. Can you tell us about these programs and why it's important to tailor programming to these communities?
Thank you. I think following on Jennifer, everyone needs and deserves opportunities for life-affirming replenishment. So when we take steps to take care of ourselves, whether that's physically, emotionally, or mentally, it supports us to feel well and gives us feedback that reinforces those actions. And when we feel well, we feel worthy and we're better able to contribute to the world around us. If one identifies from one or more marginalized groups and is perhaps less valued by the dominant culture, countering those subtle and overt messages may even be more necessary. so that tending to self-care even more important. Spaces where we're honored for who we are, the spaces that affirm our identities, are ones where our authentic selves are more likely to blossom. There's a shared lived history over the past more than 50 years that has impacted the lives of older queer community members, excuse me. And for persons living with memory loss and care partners, there is a journey that's unique to everyone. And that journey takes place in our Western society that values intellect and accomplishments. Stigma and shame can be a part of that experience. And dementia-friendly recreation is people first and strengths-based, so counters that stigma. Both Rainbow Recreation, which is programs for the LGBTQ+, 50+ community members, as well as friends and allies, and dementia-friendly recreation, programs for people living with memory loss and care partners, provide opportunities to be with other people who may understand more readily the situation, the lived experience, and there's not a need to cover or to hide, which can be exhausting. And instead, these spaces can allow shared connection, and that creates community and joy.
Thanks, Tamara. Paige, your turn. You have over 20 years of experience working with evidence-based health promotion programs for older adults and adults aging with disability. Can you please tell our audience what exactly evidence-based health promotion programs are?
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to kind of level set about that and tie in to the comments we've heard about parks in Seattle, and then about this overarching equity lens where inclusion is and so important and so key. I mean, people are living longer and with more chronic conditions. So they need support not only in healthcare and social service systems, but also in all our community-based supports, like parks, that are essential services. And evidence-based health promotion programs really help people to healthfully manage their conditions where they live, work, play, and congregate. So Parks and Recreation is just a natural partner for evidence-based health promotion programming. Some programs prepare people to take care of increasing their physical activity, like Tai Chi or enhanced fitness. Other programs help people manage medication, like home meds would be an example of that. But others then, reduce depression, like the Pearls program, or support health-related behavior change, something like diabetes self-management, right? Or enhanced wellness. So those are examples of evidence-based programs. All evidence-based programs, though, have been rigorously tested in controlled settings and proven effective, and then translated into replicable community models and that are available to community-based organizations through public health channels. So the evaluations have been subjected to critical peer review. And what's important about that is it's not just one research team saying this program works, but it's other experts in the field examining the methods used and the evaluations and the conclusions reached to concur that, yes, this program is effective. So once we get kind of to that point and you can implement an evidence-based program and really be confident about improved health outcomes for your participants. So that's why it's considered a best practice strategy for community health promotion. And it can really add, evidence-based programs can add value in many ways. I mean, they're part of an ecosystem, right? There's lots of programs in Parks and Recreation. Some are evidence-based, some are not. But they can really add value in that program managers can concentrate their efforts on program delivery in the community rather than on program development. And then it allows them to reach a larger population and have and measure the impact on that population. One of the other nice features of evidence-based programs and including them in your overall offerings is really that they're attractive to like healthcare providers, for instance, for referrals, because they reduce healthcare utilization, right? So people really are taking charge of their own health. I think one other thing I'll say, Cheryl, is there's confusion sometimes about the difference between research-based and evidence-based, because those words all sound alike to me as well. And a common misconception is that a program based on research is evidence-based, because that would make sense. But it's different in that a program can have content from research, or it can, for instance, have some parts of it that are based in research, but the overall program and how it's been delivered hasn't shown that it's evidence-based and improved health outcomes. So it's just kind of this whole package kind of piece is what makes it an evidence-based program. So I've just said a lot of words. Basically, it's a proven program with measurable health outcome improvements for the participants or clients.
And I would have to say, anytime we are trying to get grants and things like that for programming, having evidence-based programs really helps, because you can show the statistics and the improvement of people's health. So this question is for everyone. I'm going to start with Jennifer to answer this first. Last month, the Civic Coffee event focused on brain health. This month, in addition to being Parks and Recreation Month, it's also National Minority Mental Health Month. Do you all see a connection between mental health and access to parks? Starting with Jennifer.
Most definitely. It's interesting from an Olmsted perspective, because neither the senior Olmsted or John Olmsted, our Olmsted, really would have used the terminology that we use today, but you see in their writings so many references to things that just resonate when you read them. One of my favorite examples is that Frederick Olmsted advocated for the way he would wind paths through a park, that there wouldn't be a straight line, that they would be winding paths that followed natural contours of the land, was that he contrasted that with a city sidewalk where you have to be so careful. You have to watch where you're going, not get knocked into the street, not get jostled. And so you're just constantly attentive to where you are and how you're moving through space. Whereas in one of the parks that he designed, you would be able to move through the space intuitively and not be jostled. So you get sort of that overstimulation of city streets gets mitigated, and your brain gets restoration from being in a park. And then another example is in the 19th century, when the Olmsteds were first developing sort of their principles for design, they were very concerned about the increasing number of people that were inside all day working in offices, the clerks that were doing the paperwork, the people that were working in these offices that are growing up in the cities. And then also if you're working in a factory and, it's just constant noise and that, that industrialization and the effects that had on people. And they really saw parks as an antidote to that, that it was a way to, the way they talk about it was about how kind of harkening back to that more pastoral lifestyle, that kind of human farmer that you hear about so much and sort of the ideal for early American history, and the realization that that wasn't going to be the reality for most Americans. And again, tying that to having a healthy populace that would become, they carried it a bit further. They said, if you're going to have a healthy democracy where people are voting, you need to have healthy people that are doing the voting. And that a big part of that was having access. And, I see all those markers that we now know are just the different keys to mental health and stability and the restorative experience of being in nature when you, especially when you can't leave the city. If you don't have the economic wherewithal to get to nature outside the city, then you have to have those parks.
Tamara, do you want me to repeat the question or do you remember?
You can repeat it for a moment.
Okay. This month, in addition to it being Parks and Recreation Month, it's also National Minority Mental Health Month. Do you see a connection between mental health and access to parks?
I absolutely see a connection. And following on Jennifer and Paige's comments, I think the past over 2 years with the pandemic and the racial reckoning, we know sort of intuitively, we've known that there's research that says parks are good, but I think there was a kind of a really lived experience by a lot of people, and that's more acknowledged openly. And one thing that came to mind a bit about this is prior to the pandemic, like maybe the summer before or fall before was when it finished, there was a research, not evidence-based, but on some walking programs. And so when we do things like that, it sort of affirms things that we kind of think we know. But I love programs that are actually evidence-based, but in a couple of walking programs, some of the things that came out were the importance of the fact that for many people, that one weekly walk was their social connection. And like it was the time that they would know that they were going to interact with other human beings and have that, important social connection. So that was affirmed, as was the accountability factor, maybe especially when the weather isn't lovely and, it gets people out and moving. One thing that wasn't particularly asked about and was surprising to the researcher, and let me acknowledge her, Alexa Means was a PhD nursing student at the time. And it was the spiritual benefits of being in our green spaces. And so I think absolutely, and that they're important to us, and we need to make sure we take very good care of them and provide that inclusive access for everybody.
Thank you. Paige?
I think Jennifer just had a comment.
Oh, she did?
Yeah, if I could just throw in one thing based on that is, I sort of, one thing to note, sort of thinking historically though, is that the mental health benefit, particularly thinking about Minority Mental Health Month, is that the invisible barriers that are in parks, like I don't want to ignore that detracts from the mental health benefits if you're feeling unwelcome in any way, or the sort of microaggression little jabs that sometimes happen. We're dealing with this in Volunteer Park with the memorial marker that was incorrect and very racially patronizing, and that was a little not so invisible barrier, but invisible to people that were making decisions. I didn't like it, but I didn't quite understand how harmful it was until we dug into it. So I think it's an important kind of counterbalance to, you have to be mindful about how welcoming the spaces are to everyone.
Paige, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate this conversation. I think, physical activity overall is one of the best things we can do, right? I know I'm singing with the choir on the screen, but for overall well-being and improve your mental health, and reflecting on the comments here, when we were all inside in the beginning of COVID, I could look out my window and see families walking together in ways that I never saw before COVID. So I do feel like there was a sort of a rediscovery of the value of being outside and unplugged, can I say, from our screens and outside and being together and waving to people across the street or in a park and feeling like you could be outside. And certainly there's many studies that show the value of taking your physical activity outside, right? Walking on a trail, rolling on a trail, but even eating outside, playing in a sandbox outside, whatever that is. And it does seem to lower stress and improve mental well-being. And who couldn't use more of that? And UW is doing some studies right now focused in the dementia realm on nature boosting brain function and trying to understand that more and how it reduces depression and lowers anxiety. But very clearly in what Jennifer just shared, that importance of reducing barriers to park access, making sure spaces feel safe and welcoming and inclusive to everyone is so important to the health benefits that you get by being there, right? So we have to make sure that that pathway is there and open to everybody for those spaces. So definitely tied together with mental health.
One of the things that has come up in probably the last 4 or 5 years is, and I think NRPA launched it, was the prescription to nature that doctors actually prescribe now, and it's a real thing. So that shows you how important it is, and people know. So that's really great. So here's another question for everyone. What kind of racial and social justice considerations do you think are important when it comes to making sure all people have access to parks and recreation? And Jennifer, you alluded to that with the comment about the volunteer park. So I'm just going to let you start again.
I jumped ahead. It's interesting that I've been thinking a lot about this over the past year and a half or so, because we got involved with the Beersheba effort to redevelop that park, the Link to Lake Park effort. And this idea that, I would never say ever that the Parks Department did ever intentionally left out neighborhoods or made decisions that were directly, trying to exclude people. That's not what I would say at all. But instead, it's more that systemic thing that we are all, at least I am, learning very deeply about. And how do you very consciously think about what needs to be done for equity, not necessarily just the equality question, but then also to look at what are the unspoken messages people are getting, and then who is involved in planning. I'm part of the Volunteer Park Trust. It's an amazing group of people. But we are trying to be very conscious about who we partner with and what sort of questions we're asking and how our programs are specifically welcoming to all groups of people. And to sort of be proactive rather than just, we're not putting up a barrier, so it must be fine. But instead to look at how do you specifically draw people in and make connections and build that community.
Tamara, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. I think, the question of who has a seat at the table, who is involved in the decision-making is one of the considerations. How are we ensuring all voices and needs are incorporated into the policies and the practices? I think questioning assumptions is very important. Assumptions, they tend to serve the dominant culture. And so kind of inherently people more privileged. And like Jennifer just said, it's not just that you didn't put up a barrier, but what's the actively, like, how are you working to counter those potential things? Ageism is one, and I think it's one of the isms that we don't talk enough about. It's super prevalent in our society, and our generalizations can can be ageist, even by those of us working in the aging field. So I think that is one thing that really needs to be considered as we're working to be inclusive and making sure we're reaching all the people. And of course, importantly, is what are we doing to design programs with the community? You know, how are we going about doing things, and you know, not planning it and running it by people, but literally from the beginning, incorporating that work, which, you know, is time intensive. It takes a lot of intentionality. And then another question is from more of the kind of programmatic end is, like, for example, are instructors, fitness instructors, representative of the broader community? I think those are some of the things. I think there are many more things as well.
Thank you. Paige?
There are so many things. So I appreciate what's been brought up. And, you know, I think the pandemic has really driven home the importance of an overarching equity lens in all that we do when thinking about how to improve access, and thinking about how to improve the quality of care and the quality of programming for people, specifically in the work we do with people living with multiple chronic conditions, which is the focus of our work. So how do we think about that in the network of community organizations we work with and in Parks and Recreation as being key to that work? And one of the areas we've really focused in on is the disability community. And, you know, it's the largest minority in the nation, with 1 in 4 people, or 25% of the population. And in the United States, when we look at older adults, 35.2, I have to look at that statistic, of people over 65 report having a disability. And those are folks that are reporting it, because we know some people don't see themselves as having a disability. It's just like, my knees aren't working well today, because, you know, which we may think of as a mobility disability, but to the individual, it may just be they breathe the water they're swimming in that day for their body and how it feels, right? So why is that so important? And it's because people with disability are 3 times more likely to develop heart disease, to have a stroke, to have hypertension, to have any of the secondary conditions that we see that impact our quality of life. And so being more physically active is really crucial to lower the risk of developing chronic diseases. And so it's crucial to provide barrier-free opportunities to access parks, access community centers, access places where there's programming that's affordable and accessible and inclusive. And so when I think about inclusion, meaning, you know, transforming communities overall, for those of us that are working in the physical activity space, as Tamara just mentioned, you know, representation matters a great deal, certainly. We also need to make sure we're learning about what in creating safe and welcoming spaces, that the way we are for enhanced fitness, the way we are providing support and guidance to instructors on how to guide different learning styles, for instance, to be welcoming to all, is just a really important, and we know we have a lot of work to do, and we do this work that very much includes participant focus groups, right? Because it's this nothing about us without us, which is a saying that comes from the disability community, but certainly is true in all of the communities we're talking about. And representation is so important. So that's what I'd add.
I have to say, I have been preaching to the choir, and I'm not sure if anybody's on this call who's hiked with me before, done programs with me in lifelong recreation, but I used to be quite a hiker, and now I've developed the arthritis in both my knees, and I'm bone on bone, and all through COVID, I'm completely inactive, and I felt really bad about all the years I've said to everybody, you got to keep moving, move it or lose it, because it is hard to push through that pain. And I know that now. So I'm apologizing publicly to everybody who I thought it was easy to do, and it's not.
Yeah.
So my next question is for Tamara. What unique challenges might older adults and people with disabilities face when trying to access recreation programs?
This question, I feel like we could talk about all day. I think there are layers of challenge. And a first one is speaking from Parks and Recreation, where I sit. We're a complex organization. So just information, where do you find the information? When you find it, is it accessible? You know, in an e-newsletter that I did, was a body of work I was responsible for before my current roles. I started to make some changes in that e-newsletter so that it would be more accessible with alt text and image descriptions and better suited for screen readers. I do that now in the dementia-friendly e-newsletter. You know, the logistical registration. We need that registration data. We need to tell the story of our work. We need to know who we're serving, so we know where the gaps are and where we need to work better. We need to advocate for funding. And that registration isn't always a straightforward thing for new people. There are many ways to do it. You can go to a community center, you can phone a community center, you can do it online. You know, there are avenues, but people with busy lives sometimes would just love to be able to show up at a program. So I think that's a layer. Then there's a cost layer. You know, we at Seattle Parks and Recreation, I think we feel pretty proud to say our programs are low cost. And that's a relative statement. So we have financial scholarships. We provide scholarships, and that requires someone to follow through, to submit their paperwork and information to the city. Sometimes that feels like a barrier to people. We have scholarships available in many different languages. I mean, scholarship paperwork is available in many different languages, and I fully, you know, hope that many people will take advantage of that. It's another step, and to do that also, one needs to be aware of timing. You know, if it's a new scholarship cycle, but registration time is there, that is something you need to sort of have your ducks in a row before that date. On the financial piece, a positive aspect is dementia-friendly programs are all free at this point. That's because of grant work, donations, just individual donations, people who have benefited and appreciate what they're receiving, so give back. Sponsorships, you know, finding businesses and people in the community, and an award. Rainbow Recreation follows our general lifelong unit model of what is termed pay to play. And my goal is to reach a broader spectrum of people in the older queer community. And so, you know, I want to work on alternatives to that, so that cost isn't a barrier. And but I think hugely important, those are sort of layers that even before you get to the program, is it for me? You know, we've mentioned this in sort of responses to other questions and parts of this conversation, but do I see myself represented? You know, it's not enough to say translate information that there might be a class at a local community center if when you get there, it doesn't really feel like a good fit. So I think fundamental to that is making sure that the programs we're creating are designed with community involvement and based on expressed needs and desires. And that is, you know, a process that requires both time and I think real intentionality to that work. That's something that's been fundamental to the dementia-friendly programming in particular from the beginning. People with memory loss have been a part of designing programs. So making sure all those voices are included. And then, you know, there's the physical abilities, lifelong recreation. When we say older adult, we're talking about a 50-year age span. And I think this is also where that ageism can come in. You know, there can be a 95-year-old who is quite fit, and there can be a 50-year-old or even a less than 50-year-old who would like to participate in programs because of physical ability. So I think another aspect of that is, how does our unit that is, you know, I would say not fully staffed, is how do we serve an entire city with a huge array of needs? Because we can't have one of everything a mile from everyone's home, which of course would be the ideal.
That's good. One of the things we do in Seattle Parks and Recreation is we do try to offer in every sector 3 levels of fitness ability, recognizing what Tamara said, that we have a wide age range. And an interesting thing that's happened over the years, Tamara used to run our Sound Steps program, and we had, how old was the lady who used to do the half marathon? 95 or older? Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yes, I think about that, 94.
And we have a new outdoor recreation specialist on staff, Brooke, and she's doing a running club. She's a runner herself. And she has an 85-year-old runner that is so thankful that she started this, because she doesn't have any of her contemporaries that run or anything. And so she's running with Brooke every week. So I think that's pretty awesome. This next question is for Paige. Does Enhanced Fitness have subsets where programs are catered to different older adults, age groups, people with different diseases like arthritis and Parkinson's, and disabilities?
Great question. And yes, I think first just kind of level setting what Enhanced Fitness is a little bit, because I realize we've been talking about it and there may be people viewing that don't. So just overall, it's a low cost, evidence-based group exercise and fall prevention program that helps older adults at all levels from frail to fit become more active, energized, and empowered to take charge of their health. I mean, you know, that's really been the focus for what is coming up on our 30th year next year. Many of those years with Seattle Parks and Recreation, thankfully. The program is proven to improve physical function, decrease depression, decrease falls risk and injury if there is a fall, provide a social benefit, provide ongoing physically active lifestyle. You know, it's a great step to then doing other things, right? Taking on different types of classes, for instance, that are offered through Seattle Parks and Recreation. But it also reduces medical care utilization costs and mortality rates, and also unplanned hospitalizations. it has been studied for different chronic disease subsets, Cheryl, and it can easily be progressed. It can be progressed. I say easily. It can be progressed to meet people where they are in an inclusive environment, and that's the idea, right? Federally, it's designated as arthritis approved by the CDC, and then also by U.S. Health and Human Services Administration on Community Living as a fall prevention, physical activity, and chronic disease self-management program. But addressing so I just kind of wanted to get the lay of the land, but then addressing your question around just today's work, because this is not a static program, examples of current work with specific focus groups would include the Pacific study that's going on at the University of Washington, focused on knee osteoarthritis and health education for pain management. It's very, very focused on pain management. So it's UW Department of Rehab Medicine and pain management led study. And the University of Vermont Medical Center just wrapped up a pilot study with really encouraging learnings across rural New England states focused on delivery to cancer patients, right? So that's another very specific group. And then our partnership with Move United Sports this year, which I know Move United Sports also works a lot with park and recreation sites. They're an adaptive sports organization, and they've really focused in with us on work we did with the National Center for Health, Physical Activity, and Disability around bringing the program to veterans 50 and up together, mostly in VA sites, VA medical center sites, but also in kind of adaptive sports sites. So kind of a wide variety there. So it can be offered in specific subsets and can also accommodate all comers. And there's enough room for adaptation in there to meet people where they are with that work. And we've done we've actually since 2020, we even have a second edition out of a revised and updated inclusion guide that focuses on teaching strategies. And we're just continuing to update as we learn with those communities and from those communities. So.
And I asked about Parkinson's in this question, and Seattle Parks and Recreation does offer a couple Parkinson's programs right now. We have Dance for Parkinson's, and that is ongoing at Garfield Community Center. And we now have Juggling for Parkinson's in Northwest Seattle. And several years ago, we did a study with the University of Washington on tandem bicycling for Parkinson's patients, which was very successful. And it looks like they want to start that up again, maybe in 2023. So that was in partnership also with Outdoors for All, who's based out of Magnuson Park, and they provided tandem bikes with a able-bodied person in the front doing the front bicycling, and then somebody with Parkinson's on the back, and was proven to be very successful. Really interesting to watch that program. So Jennifer, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of the research around, whereas enhanced fitness, the cardiovascular piece or the aerobic piece of it for your heart is focused on steady state, like getting up and steady state endurance for, you build up to 20 minutes there, walking or doing aerobics, or in some communities drumming, or I don't know. We've adapted it in various ways to make sure that it meets the needs of a community culturally and what they want to do. With Parkinson's, a lot of the research has focused on success with high intensity. So intensity changes that you might get through, you can think, in addition to the programs you named, Cheryl, I know there's a Pedaling for Parkinson's program also. I think that's in YMCA's, and then like rock steady boxing is another one. I don't know if that's been in Seattle, and kind of that, that high intensity uptake, which is very specific to, it seems to have some effect on tremors and conditions. So that Parkinson's is a really interesting space. Certainly there are also folks that are in enhanced fitness with Parkinson's, but they might do these programs as well, right? It's not just a one and done, right? There's just a whole panacea of great programming out there, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and honestly, if anybody knows anybody who teaches or anything like that, we are always looking for new instructors for our enhanced fitness program that we put through training, that Pages puts through training. And for anything, if you have an idea, we would love to figure out how to make it work. But here's a question for Jennifer. What is one way Olmsted considered older adults and or people with disabilities during design of a current or recent park?
What's interesting that like the other considerations with mental health, we don't see where he specifically addressed those issues of different age and abilities, but it's embedded in a lot of the design principles. One of them is sort of the division of space within parks between passive and active recreation, sort of having those ball fields and more team sports or tennis courts or that sort of thing, separated from areas where walking and contemplation can take place. And so, he discouraged the park system from managing schoolyards because he saw those as sort of single-use landscapes. And instead, he advocated for things like Hiawatha Playfield, where you have the very programmed active spaces, but you also have room where there are trees and lawns and plantings, so that, and so in effect, what he was doing was creating spaces for a wide range of abilities and different reasons for going to a park. And I always kind of balk a little at the passive recreation. That's a landscape architecture term because, I think it's passive only in the sense that it's not set up and organized according to a time schedule or a set of rules, but there's, a lot of activity going on in those passive spaces. They're just a different nature to them. And then also we found that as we worked on projects where we integrate ADA requirements into upgrades or renovations of parks, that it's surprisingly easy to adapt an Olmsted design to have those specific accommodations that we've learned since his time are so useful. The biggest challenge are stairs, of course, when you have these steep Seattle hills and he puts stairs instead of a switchback path, that can be challenging. But it's interesting how, it wasn't on the agenda, but it still got integrated to a certain degree, just in the designing for accessibility of the whole community, just kind of as a philosophy.
So this is a question for everyone. What is your organization doing now to increase access to parks and recreational activities? This could be a specific activity you're providing this summer or a big goal you're working on more broadly. And I guess let's start with Paige this time.
Sure, I think for us, it's probably a broader goal. We do some work with National Recreation and Parks Association. And last year, we worked to really understand and honestly learning from Seattle Parks and Recreation, because they did such a great job in pivoting. That's such an overused word now, right? To start up remote delivery of programming. So we worked with 2 or 3 organizations nationally to do that, or states nationally to do that with NRPA. And then this year, actually currently here we're in the middle of it. I would say we're doing that work in 7 states right now. And then these cohorts are very focused on inclusion, and will continue to learn from them, how things work, what doesn't work, you know, and bring that back kind of in an iterative program improvement cycle. You know, how do we do this better? What's working for these communities? Some of them are small and rural, and others are in big cities, and they're, you know, it varies quite a bit. So we are learning as we go. So kind of a bigger lens right now.
Tamara?
Let's see. I think that generally, due to the past couple of years, the dual pandemics, I think there's a more broadly stated, it's more broadly stated as a priority. So I feel that helps those of us who are wanting to push the work forward and have been, you know, working to do that. It helps point to something. So I think the good news is that is more elevated as a priority. I think for my particular work, one of the projects that I have spent a lot of time on for the past, I guess more than a year, is the SHARP program, which if you were listening last month, I believe you heard about that here. So that's the Sharing History Through Active Reminiscence and Photo Imagery. And that program involves many community partners. It involved focus groups where the particular references that will be, that are used in the program came from the communities, conversations determining what was important. So that program involved hiring young scholars of color. So there's a lot of layers to how that program feels like it's really trying to make a program. It's a culturally celebratory walking program for the Black older adult community, and includes people living with memory loss and people not living with memory loss. And we our unit is, I'll say, supporting seniors creating art who received a grant from Seattle Parks and Recreation, sort of another body of us. And we are working to get art classes in lots of parks that are in what are called equity zones. So where people that are underserved can be reached. And my particular work on that has been, I'm collaborating with Jen Pride to provide an art program that's in Judkins Park beginning in August. And for dementia-friendly recreation, both of my programs are rebuilding and kind of got started after resuming during the pandemic later than some. And with dementia-friendly, a particular interest of mine is how to create programs that are particularly culturally relevant. And so I've been working in a couple of communities to try to see the way to that. So that is something that's a longer, broader goal. I feel like I have to say one thing about access in parks, and that is about the unhoused community. So I think that when we of course want safe spaces to be in, and we also need to keep in mind that a lot of unhoused people are older adults, are veterans, can be from these communities that maybe because of historic discrimination have not had the economic wealth. So I think that is something that I think we really do need to keep in mind as we do this work, that how do we make both happen? I think that's a huge issue.
And Jennifer, you kind of answered this question in your last response, but did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I'll just throw out that we're very excited at the Trust because we opened the new amphitheater this year. And the structure itself is fully accessible, physically accessible. And we redid the path going from the upper concourse in the park down to the stage, and then the seating area. There is an accessible route to the seating area on the grass. And it's such a great thing. I'm just really, really excited. For it's always been technically accessible, but not really. And it's just such a more welcoming space, and there are new disabled parking spots. And so that's something that we took on this project, not knowing the ins and outs of a construction project, but that's been a value added part of it. It's been really exciting.
Okay, I just got the running out of time message from everybody. So I'm going to ask this last series of questions and ask you to keep your answers as brief as you can. So this one again is for Jennifer. How does Seattle Park System influence how people live in the city today, especially older adults?
This is when really quickly, the key points are that it offers access to nature in an ever denser city, and that affects people living in assisted living, because there's not always gardens and spaces that hands on the dirt kind of experiences, and parks are so important for that. And the variety of experiences that you can have. You can get to the water, you can get to the viewpoints, all of those things. And then also that there are places to build community. We talked about this a little bit today, but I think that I've talked with lots of people that maybe don't realize that parks is just as important for people to gather in those spaces as it is for individual experiences within those landscapes. So I think those are two really important things.
That's good. I am going to skip down to the last question that's for everyone. And because we've answered some of the other things that are on here in other questions, but what is the one thing you wish people knew about the ways in which parks and recreation influence our lives? So the one thing that you wish people knew. Paige, we'll start with you.
They're not just like a nice thing to have, right? I mean, I feel like they're essential, and they encourage physical activity, and they encourage healthy lifestyle, and they make us calmer, healthier humans being and humans doing. I think that would be my, they're essential.
Tamara?
I think I would say the number of stories that I have heard and witnessed of the program's impacts on people's lives. One example, an individual who literally stopped taking a medication because his health improved so dramatically. So I think that I also really feel that turning the question back to those who aren't being served, and the invitation to, what does your community need and want? How can we use the resources that we have to provide the access that people who truly need the access can benefit, because they are essential.
That's good. Jennifer?
I would say that hardly any, if any, landscapes that we experience and enjoy and benefit from are purely naturally occurring. And there's the human influence in designing it, but then also the human influence in maintaining it. And so that value for parks employees, that it's really important to have people tending to our parks so that they can kind of not get loved to death. There's just so much population pressure on these parks. And so, advocating for mowing and planting and, tending to trees is equally important to all of these fabulous facilities that we have.
Yeah. And I would just remind everybody that Seattle Parks and Recreation is a tax-based program. You guys are paying for it. And those community centers are not clubs that you have to buy a membership for. They're open for everybody. So I am going to yield the floor back to Age Friendly Seattle. I don't know who's going to pipe in, Dinah or somebody.
Yes, I will pipe in. Thank you. That was a super interesting discussion. And it looks like we have a few questions. So we have probably 5, maybe we can squeeze 10 minutes. And let me pull up some of the questions. And just so folks know, we are also streaming this on Facebook live. And so some are coming in that way. So while my team is sending over some questions, I had one of my own to Jennifer. You mentioned that Olmsted Brothers were really mindful of creating sort of different zones of parks. So one for the zoo, one for old growth. Is that unique to Seattle?
No, it's a principle of Olmsted design that you see repeated around the city. I mean, sorry, around the country. We're just particularly lucky that we have this incredibly richly varied landscape. And like Olmsted couldn't believe his luck with the views off in the distance, right? He basically designed our park system to take advantage of those views any way he could, which is very different than if you like think of Central Park that looks very inward, or Prospect Park. Here he flung open the windows and looked outward. And so we're just a really great example of it.
I don't blame him. Again, as a new resident to Seattle, I like, keep turning corners and seeing more incredible views. So I think we have 3 questions in the chat. We're having slight technical difficulties. I can't actually see them, so someone is sending them to me. Let's see. In the meantime, so Cheryl, I think you mentioned nature prescribing, and I'd be curious if any of you want to weigh in with a little more detail about what that is. I know that's sort of a national movement, but what does that look like here in Washington or even locally?
You know, our last superintendent, in partnership with a doctor, did a video on it and was encouraging, I think it was for the medical profession, encouraging them to use that opportunity. I haven't seen anything come to me, a prescription for anybody. I don't know if somebody could use that prescription. They might be able to. I know a lot of seniors write off their tennis shoes as a tax deduction or their fitness classes because their doctor has prescribed them to take a fitness class. So it's possible if you've got a fitness for a recreation program, you might be able to use it on your tax base, but I haven't seen any come through yet. I just thought it was a really great idea.
I had no idea that you could use those things as tax write-offs. Okay, I have the questions. It's written very small, so forgive me. Luckily, you can't see me squinting. So this first one says, I noticed that certain parks in Seattle are not as updated or not as nice as some other ones. How are resources allocated to different communities?
Well, I guess I can speak to that. Well, and probably Jennifer can too, but the Parks Department overall, since this, I forget what they call it, but everybody's retiring. Our Parks Department, I think 40% of the people that work for Seattle Parks and Recreation are retiring within the next 3 years, and I'm one of them. So and then people have not wanted to work. So I know during these last almost 3 years now, we are so short-staffed. So that's, if you're noticing it now, that's it. And now we're just reintroducing our opportunity for volunteers to come in and help in the parks again, because we haven't allowed that during COVID. So that's again happening. So if you're interested in volunteering to do Ivy out or, taking out blackberry vines or whatever in your local park, that's an option now. But I think the unhoused issue has been a problem, and we're just trying to figure out where to land and what to do. So I think as we move forward, things will even out and we'll get help out to where it needs to be. But the Parks Department is really great. If you have your park in your neighborhood and you see a problem, if you email the Parks Department and let them know, you can bet they'll get out there. So it's kind of like squeaking wheel gets oiled. So
that's a good tip to keep in mind.
yeah.
Another question here says that Seattle has a large immigrant community and many of our older adults here do not speak English. Are there resources, or what are some of the things that Parks and Recreation does to increase language access to more communities and make people feel welcome to participate? So this is asking specifically Parks and Rec, but I think this applies to everyone on this call.
Tamara, do you want to answer that for us, or do you want me to?
I'm happy to answer at least some aspects of it. So a program that I had been responsible for was the food and fitness programs, which were congregate meal programs with fitness components for different cultural communities. So those were opportunities for people to come together, eat food of the culture, and have relevant fitness programming. Those, of course, are partnerships with organizations in the community. Those opportunities still exist. At times we have done things like a field trip for a particular community, and then try to, as people become perhaps more comfortable taking other classes. But the reality, and I think I tried to touch on this before, is just translating a flyer to say you have a class isn't the answer. I know one of the things in the pandemic that I did was there was a lot of depression and impact from COVID and people fearful of going outside. So I put together fit kits by getting donations of all sorts of items, and got my physical therapist to, we made some exercises. This was for the East African community. So there are efforts made, and those congregate meal programs still exist, but they are being handled by community centers, not our unit. So I can't really speak to them now. Maybe Cheryl can. But I think that is, like my desire to support dementia-friendly programming that is targeted to the relevant activities of a culture. That's something, if there's anybody who's listening, please come to me. I would love to do that. And then there's capacity issues. There's an entire city and 2 entire bodies of work and 1 person. So I think those are some of the things. I know that we have done things with language access. I worked with the communications department on that. Part of what the department is trying to do is to show the need by projects, like wanting to come up with a system for simple exercises being translated for the East African community. There's no budget for that. So we have to show need, and then we can advocate for budget. So unfortunately, there's not a quick response. But I think that there are a lot of people in the department who really do want to work with all of the community. And so, come, reach out and we can see what we can do.
And I would just add in a complementary funding mechanism through the Veterans, Seniors, and Health and Human Services levy in King County is supporting health promotion programming through diverse community sites. So there's 14 very diverse sites that are lifting up programming. Some of it's evidence-based programming, like the Tai Chi program at ICHS, International Community and Health Service, is a wonderful program and has recently been translated into new languages. It has multilingual um, presentation when it's being shared online, but I believe they've gone to in person as well. But there's also programs that the communities are developing that are focused on their community and the needs they see if they don't see themselves within an adaptation of an available health promotion program. So those programs are out there as well.
Can I just say one thing?
Mhm.
I forgot to say that in May, I believe, we restarted the Spanish language Momentum program. So Momentum en Español is a program that happens, it's a partnership with Sound Generations and CMAR at Lake City, and that is a program for Spanish-speaking individuals. So definitely there are some efforts.
That's great to know. So I think we are out of time for this conversation. So I'll invite the participants to hang tight and hear a few upcoming announcements. But first, I just really want to thank our panelists and Cheryl for moderating. Tamara, I wrote down a quote of yours that you said at the very beginning, which I thought was really straight at the heart of this, which is everybody needs and deserves opportunity for life affirming rejuvenation. So I think that is a good note to end on for this discussion about Parks and Rec. And thank you. And I believe today happens to be National Appreciation Day for those who work in Parks and Recreation. And so thank you all for the work that you do and bringing us these respites all around our city. It's so, so important, as you've underscored. So thank you. And now I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Emily, from the Seattle Public Library, another organization that is heavily committed to older adults and recreation too. So Emily, why don't you take us away for some updates?
Thank you, Dinah, and thank you all the panelists. It was so wonderful to get to hear from you. I know I've worked with a lot of you in different capacities, but it's really great to see you and to bring such diverse kind of topics and perspectives into the conversation. So thank you. I'm Emily Bill. I'm the Older Adults Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library, and I help to create and run programs for the 50+ audience and advise the library on how to be best age friendly and more inclusive for all of our patrons. If you have any suggestions or comments, I can get you my contact information, which I believe is on the screen. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns. A few interesting kind of programs we're restarting are our Medicaid Made Clear presentations. We're going to be going over the different parts and plans that Medicare offers, and we'll discuss the different ways that you can receive your benefits, including the pros and cons of each and approximate costs. The goal of this meeting is really to provide you useful information so you can be in a better position to make informed decisions on your Medicare coverage. Our first presentation for the year is going to be held on July 27th at 4 p.m. and it's going to be on Zoom. Everyone is welcome, and we are dropping the link in the chat right now. We partner with Silver Kite Intergenerational Arts programming to bring different types of art classes to the library. This month we have Intro to Pastels, Dancing Through the Decades, and some dementia-friendly programming. This month it is going to be watercolors. And if you would like to see any of those or any of the other Silver Kite classes, we have classes up for August and September. You can find that at the link that we are dropping in the chat for our 50+ audience calendar at the library. And I have one more really exciting series called The Artists, and the Narrative of Loss and Resiliency. It's going to be hosted at the Central Library on July 25th from 7 to 8 p.m. Join us for a panel discussion and presentation about the changing the narratives around gun violence. This impact of gun violence continues to be felt throughout the nation and through Seattle. The Office of Arts and Culture is partnering with the Seattle Public Library and is organizing the speaker series to address and combat the effects of gun violence in our communities. This kickoff event will feature Rosette Royale, a local journalist and editor, and the panel of local artists, including Solma Ayers and Chardonnay Beaver. This lecture series, comprised of performances, presentations, and discussions, will integrate arts and cultural elements to change the narrative around gun violence. Additional events and series will be offered at different locations across the cities, with speakers and activities going through October. We're going to include the link to that event in the chat now. And I did hear that the mayor and both a head librarian at the Seattle Public Library will be at that event. So it's a great time to hear from some of our local leaders as well around issues that are really impacting our communities today. For more information on any of these programs, our plan to reopening all of our branches and much more can be found on our website, spl.org, or you can always give us a call at our number 206-386-4636. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Emily. So I'm going to hand it over to Christiane for our last announcement from Seattle City Light.
Thank you so much. Good day. My name is Christian Alcade, and I'm the Community Outreach and Engagement Advisor for Seattle City Light. And I'm supporting direct outreach about our Help with Utilities Bills campaign. And if we can move forward to the next slide. Thank you. We've launched this campaign back in April to connect customers with financial assistance so they can get caught up in their past due balance. And just FYI, the City of Seattle moratorium on utility shutoffs expired Friday, April 15th, 2022. While both Seattle City Light and Seattle Public Utilities have a legal requirement to collect payment, our goal is to help our customers who are struggling to pay their utility bills. And both utilities have expanded flexible payment plan options for all of our customers, whether you're a resident or a business customer. And bill assistance is available for income eligible residential customers. And our customers are urged to visit the website that you see on your screen, or to call us at the phone number 206-684-3000 to explore more options. And then I just wanted to give a quick FYI that there are some scans going on asking for immediate payment on personal, immediate payment for the bills. And Seattle City Light and Seattle Public Utilities would never demand payment. We would actually send you a correspondence and then encourage you to call us at our number that you see on the screen. So yeah, that's all I got. Thank you so much. And I will put our the campaign website on the chat as well as our phone number. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Christian. So I will just close us out here, and I want to make sure everybody listening knows about Community Living Connections, which is a great resource for older adults, adults with disabilities, and caregivers and family members. It can be really hard to navigate all of the resources and programs that someone might be eligible for. And so this is a great kind of portal to talk to someone, a real human who can help you figure out what you might be eligible for and how to get the care and resources that you need. So the phone number here is 844-348-5464, and you can also find it online at communitylivingconnections.org. And then last but not least, and this is a fun one, this is a discount program that Age Friendly Seattle manages. And so we want to make sure that everyone knows about it. Anybody who is 60 and older is eligible. You can contact us to get your card. We'll mail it directly to you, and then you'll be able to use it at a variety of businesses. And speaking of parks, you can use it at the zoo or the Seattle Aquarium, Parks and Recreation. And so those are great opportunities this summer to do with a family, and it really helps for older adults to have a bit of a discount. So feel free to reach out to us and we'll make sure you get a gold card. And that's it. So thank you, everybody. I think we are exactly at 12 o'clock. So really appreciate everybody tuning in. It was a pleasure to speak with our panelists today, and we'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.